Good morning and welcome to another episode of the RK Leadership Podcast, where we empower tomorrow's leaders through the sharing of knowledge, experience, and inspiring stories. I'm your host, Rob Cameronpour, and my very special guest today is Neha Nautiyal, and she's a software engineer and a nutrition coach at the moment. And I'll let her introduce herself a little bit more. But before I do that, I want to take this moment to thank you for being with me on the podcast today. And I'm very excited to talk to you about your journey and your stories as well. Thank you, Neha.
Oh, of course. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. So why don't we get right into it? Why don't you start by telling us about your story and how you got to where you are today?
Sure. It's a long one because no paths, I think, are linear. And even when you think they are, there are many lessons along the way that you're learning. So I thought I knew what I wanted to do with my life from high school and in college. I thought I wanted to be a professor of chemistry. So after college, where I studied chemistry, I enrolled in a PhD program. And after 1 year, I had to really question myself and think whether that was the right move for me. It just didn't feel like the right fit. I couldn't pinpoint the reasons, but I knew I needed a break. So I took a 1 year leave of absence, and I ended up going to France, and I taught English in a French elementary school. During that year, I realized that I was not meant to be in that doctorate program. So I left the doctorate program and I felt guilty. I felt like a failure, but I had to listen to what my body was telling me. And then I returned to the States. I still didn't really have any idea of what I wanted to do. I ended up applying to some programs and I ended up enrolling in a master's in secondary education, and I became a high school chemistry teacher. And I was there I taught for about almost 10 years, including that year and the year before where I substitute taught. And then I enrolled in a coding boot camp without the intention of leaving education, but I had loved the boot camp so much, being a student again after so long of being a teacher. And I found that I was a really good problem solver, and especially using technology. I was really good with using technology, that I ended up changing careers again, and I became a software engineer. And it was such an amazing experience. And that was when I learned, no matter what plans I have for myself, sometimes, there are other plans that you're not aware of. And I'm so glad that I listened to myself and I followed that journey. And I'm currently a software engineer. But then also a few years ago, I had two little girls, and I had a lot of trouble getting back to what I looked like pre-pregnancy. And it wasn't necessarily the weight. It was just, how I felt in my body and just feeling weak, low energy. And I really tried so many diets in my whole life of starving yourself and going and eating only fruits and vegetables. And it was a lot of yo-yo dieting. I would lose the weight and then gain it back. And I never found anything consistent to keep it off. And then, pregnancy was a whole nother beast. And so I ended up hiring a macro nutrition coach for myself. And that was when my life truly transformed, because I realized a new way of looking at food where you didn't have to cut out your favorite foods, and you could still achieve your health goals no matter what they were, whether it was to lose weight or maintain your weight or even build muscle. And working with a coach transformed my life so much so that I ended up becoming a coach myself. And now I have my own business. And I never would have thought that I would have taken this route to get to where I am. But I am so thankful for everything that I have done in my past, because that's how I am the person I am today.
Nice. That's amazing. And that's a great story, Neha. And I want to break that down too. I've got several questions that I want to ask you with respect to your journey. And it's great that you followed you followed your heart versus other aspects and following someone else's dream, which is very important. With respect to becoming an engineer, and now I know your father is also an engineer. Is that something that coming from a background and a culture and parents' beliefs? Is that something that you were kind of forced into saying, hey, you got to be an engineer, a doctor, or whatever? Or again, is that something you really wanted to do regardless?
Yes, that's a great question. I have two older siblings. So I'm the youngest of three,
Mhm.
and both of them are medical doctors. So I feel like my parents basically said, you know, we already have doctors in the family. You're the third one, you're the last one. You can do whatever you want.
Nice.
They never actually said that, but I just had a feeling of I really was able to pursue what I wanted to pursue. And so even when I went into teaching, they said, "Great. It's a stable job. It's you can move up. Fantastic. If this is what you want." They supported me 100% no matter what decision I made. And I was very appreciative of that. I also wish that I would have had a little bit of guidance, more guidance to my strengths, because I have always been tech savvy, even growing up. But you know what? I have no regrets, and they did their best, just like we're all doing. And so I really have them to thank for all the help and support they've given.
Awesome. Now again, you being a parent yourself, what would be your message to those who kind of who are in that shoes where there are cultural beliefs and parents have the specific beliefs from back in the day and they force their kids to do what they want to do? What's your message for those parents out there?
So I honestly believe that your kids are a very minor extension of you, in that you can instill your values, but and beliefs and maybe some really values, beliefs, the principles of life,
Mhm.
but ultimately they are going to be independent. Like, you can guide them, but you can't tell them what to do. They are not, they were not born to live the rest of your life.
That's right.
And so you can only give them all the tools that you think they need, but ultimately the decision to live their life is theirs. And
Absolutely.
once they leave your supervision and your care, you're you can't you'll always be part of their lives, but you cannot tell them what to do or what not to do. You can only guide them.
Absolutely. No, that's fantastic. And that's an important message to share with people. Now, I want to take you down the road of a not so happy moment, in your life. And the reason I want to talk about this is mindset. Mindset is very important for people to understand, strengthen, and their abilities to build that resilience. Now, at a young age, I guess your mom had left you, and now that she's rekindled and back in your life. But walk me through that point when that happened. How did you overcome? And I'm sure it wasn't a great experience to have. How did you overcome that, and how did you build your mindset?
Yes, so when I was 5, my parents separated. My mom moved out of the house, and I grew up with my dad. And my siblings, as I mentioned, are much older. They're 11 and 13 years older.
Mhm.
So I felt a lot of the time that I was a single child with my father, and a single father. And it wasn't until college, after when I graduated college, that my mom really came back into my life full time. But I had gone on a trip to India, and my dad has quite a few siblings, and we all went on this trip. And I was telling one of my uncles, that I was so mad at my mom. Why did she have to do this in my life? I never grew up with that mom, and I felt that lack.
Mhm.
And then he said, what's happened has happened. you can change the past. Instead of keep thinking about what you didn't have, think about what you did have. Think about the strengthened relationships I had with my friends, my siblings, my father. My grandmother did live with me and helped raise me as well. And that was a turning point of, instead of looking at what I can't change, let me focus on, the good that did come out of it. And somehow I did forgive her. I forgave her for what she did to me. And I realized that everything that I had gone through, I wouldn't have gone through if it wasn't for what had happened in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And right now, this is, that was many, many years ago, maybe almost 20 years ago. I am so happy with where I am now that I know that if whatever happened in my life didn't happen the way it did, I wouldn't be where I am right now. And so I have no regrets at all. And she did what she had to do.
That's amazing. And again, I ask this question of a lot of people is, when you reflect back in your life, do you kind of understand when you put the pieces together of why things happen and the reason why they happen? And that's how, we're at where we're at today, is all those pieces have come together to make us who we are today, right?
Exactly. And I tell my girls this too. My two girls are 6 and 9. And anytime anything happens in their life, I'm like, listen, you might not know why, you didn't win this tournament or you didn't get this point. But in the long run, it's going to be for the best. And one of my mentors says, you either get the result you want or the lesson you need.
Yes.
And I love that because it's reframing failure. In a way, there is no such thing as failure.
Awesome. Yeah, I've heard that many times, and I've lived it myself, so I totally understand that. Now, Neha, you were a teacher for 10 years, and now you go through this transition. Walk us through what inspired you to become a teacher, and what happened along the way to make that transition. As you know, there's a lot of people that are stuck in certain roles and they have a hard time transitioning, and the self-limiting beliefs and whatnot. Walk us through that point of your life and how that transpired.
Sure. So when I took the break from the PhD program, I taught. And that was when I first thought, oh, I'm okay at teaching. I'm not bad at teaching. And so when I returned, I had applied to so many programs in neighboring universities in Philadelphia. I thought maybe, I could do a grad program in natural language processing because I grew up speaking another language at home, and I thought, maybe that, and I had learned French, and I was a strong Francophile, and I thought, maybe we can do something with languages, and then that program, that person responded to me and said, I don't think this program is a good fit for you. How about this one? And it was a master's in secondary education. And I'm like, okay, like, I'm not sure, but you know what? Let me try. And program, there ended up being a scholarship if you committed to teaching in a high need neighborhood for 5 years. And I'm like, okay, I'm essentially going to school for free. I'm okay at teaching. I'll get better at it. So I feel like the opportunity kind of fell into my lap.
Nice.
I never actually pursued it, but I listened to the signs. I listened to what the universe was telling me, and I'm like, okay, I guess I have to do this. Let me try it. You can never say no without trying.
Yes.
Otherwise, that's an automatic failure. As long as you keep going and you try, you never know where it's going to take you. So I tried it out. I did the program. I taught for 5 years in a high needs area, and then in 3 years in a private school. And then what happened in that last year, so that I had already had my 2 daughters, and my husband, I had been with him for over 10 years at that point, and he told me, listen, you're really good with computers. Why don't you try this coding boot camp? And I enrolled in the coding boot camp with the thought of, maybe I can just create a coding club at school. I never thought that I would leave education for another career. And I enrolled. It was a 6-month program. I went to school at night. My mom was living with me. I had a 10-month-old. I was still breastfeeding. It was chaos at home, but I made it work. And I loved it. I loved the program so much. So in the middle of the program, my instructor said to me after class one day, what are you going to do after you do this coding boot camp? Like, you're really good at this. I'm like, what do you mean, what am I going to do? I'm just going to keep teaching. I'm just going to, do maybe a coding class in school or something. I never thought that I would change careers until the upper school director at the school brought me into his office one day and said, there's some parents that are complaining that you're not doing enough labs, or you're not grading the tests and giving them back fast enough, and they don't like the textbook you're using. And, as an adult, working adult, we all work our butts off. Like, I'm staying up late, lesson planning, also doing my coding bootcamp homework, replying to emails, helping students, making up test script. And on top of having 2 girls at home, it was a lot, but I was really working hard. And I was like, this is the thanks I'm going to get. And that weekend, I applied to 100 jobs in software engineering. And then I got the job, and I was like, I'm not going to do this anymore because I don't have to.
That's right. That's amazing. Now, again, that transition is very hard because you've been doing the teaching for so long. Again, where does mindset come into play? And how did you set yourself up for that transition?
I had really thought about my previous experiences in my life and how everything always worked out. Even when I got the teaching job, I had applied to so many schools and I had been rejected. Yeah. But the school where I ended up at was the best school for me. Even when I had applied to the program at university and they said, I don't think this is a good fit for you, I found one that was a good fit. Even when in college, no matter how many times I changed majors or whoever I met, everything always worked out. And that's what I had to remember. Like, no matter what happens, I have a teaching job to fall back on. I am going to be okay. I have a certificate. I will make it because I'm not going to give myself any choice. And taking a risk is really hard because you have the fear and of the uncertainty. But once you realize that you're going to be just fine, that whatever lessons you learn along the way are only going to help you in your journey to whatever the next step is, you let go a little bit of that fear and you're more willing to take that leap, especially when you listen to the world around you. Like, I never sought any of this out at that time. I feel like it was all happening to me, but I was receptive. Yes. And open to listening and observing what was happening. And so I'm so glad that I was in tune with what my body was saying, with what people around me were saying, and really what the universe was telling me.
That's amazing. And yeah, at times you just have to open your eyes and understand that things are happening for you and not to you, right? So that's great. So Neha, you talked about, one of the things you talked about during our conversation was growing up, you thought that you have to be loyal to the company and stay there forever. Now, I know that this was a pre-notion for a lot of people from our generation, at least. The younger generation, I think, has changed that quite a bit. But what are your thoughts around that, and how did that make you change to, again, wanting to transition, if you had that in mind that you had to be loyal to a company, how did you just change that?
So my father, I think, worked for maybe 2 companies in his career. And so I honestly, everything that I saw led to, you stay at your company for at least 10 years and then you get a Social Security or whatever it is down the line. And I just, it was my husband also who really helped me in seeing that nobody looks out for you like yourself. Like, what does the company actually want? The
Yeah,
company wants a profit. Company wants to grow. They're going to do whatever they think is in their best interest without even considering the employee. And it was so difficult for me when I when I left education in telling the head of school that I was leaving. I had such turmoil inside and anxiety because I felt so guilty for leaving. And then I really had to sit with that. And I had to think, why am I guilty? Like did I do anything wrong? Did I not give my 100% while I was there? And then if I stay at the school when I don't want to be there, how is that going to translate into my teaching or to my students? Like I have to be true and authentic to myself with what I want,
that's right.
disregarding my surroundings. I mean, as long as I'm not hurting anybody. And that was a really important lesson to learn. No one has your back except for you.
Yeah.
So you really have to just pay attention to what you want and what you feel. Because when you are happy and excited and passionate about what you do, the outcome will come automatically.
Yeah.
And it's about the journey and trusting the process. Not, I don't like that term actually, trust the process. I think you should enjoy the process.
Yeah.
Like maybe in the beginning, you do it for the outcome, but then you fall in love with the process. The outcome doesn't matter as much anymore.
That's right. Now, growing up and going through your journey, who are some people that you looked up to or had as a mentor, and how did those people play a part on your journey?
Yeah, I didn't have that many aside from my older siblings. It was tough because they're still young too in a way. So I was watching them grow up and figure out their life, but it was so different from mine. They like my mom had left when I was 5 and they had already grown up and had a childhood with her. So we had the same childhood, but we also didn't have the same childhood. So while I looked up to them, it was difficult. My father, of course, he really helped instill a strong work ethic, figuring out, the academics. But honestly, I feel like I didn't have the best mentor until I met my husband.
Mm.
I really think because he really saw me for who I was and not just a little sister, not just like my past was irrelevant to him. He saw me for who I was at that time because I had changed so many times before that.
Yes.
So I really feel like he has helped me to see really just my husband is the most supportive.
Okay. Okay. Now, for all the young folks out there, one of the questions I get is, and something young people have a hard time with is finding mentors. What's your advice to young people, and how would you say, like, what would you say to them in terms of seeking out a mentor for their career or life?
I think that's a tough one because if you don't know what you want to do, you find somebody who you can relate to, who you can kind of listen to in a way with how they've gotten to where they are. And I would honestly I at this point in my life, I just reach out to people. I don't care, how many followers they have or what kind of influence they have. I just reach out to people and I say, listen, this is the boat that I'm in. I would love some guidance. Would you, be willing to share any tips on how I can get from X to Y or whatever journey it is? And I will talk to anyone who listens, even if it's somebody that you're at a dinner party and you're just talking to somebody, even if it's a professor, even if anyone who has done what you want to do, whether it is in your field or not. Maybe it's not in your field, but it's still, they're doing something that where you want to be.
Amazing.
So
Yeah.
just ask.
Ask. That's it. It's simple. And again, there's a fear of being judged and even not knowing where to start or who to start with. But that's some great advice. Thank you so much. I want to now talk about self-reflection. How important is self-reflection, and at what point in your life did you learn about it?
Yeah, I never learned about it formally, but every time I faced a challenge, that's when I really thought, have I been here before? This feeling is kind of familiar.
Yes.
Of, the discomfort and like the anxiety and the fear of uncertainty, which we talked about already. It's like, what is really going on? And when you sit with those feelings, a lot of times I feel like people just want to avoid those feelings and they'll do whatever they can to distract themselves. But I honestly think that if you sit with a feeling, what's on the other side, what gets revealed, is so meaningful. And I do think that as a teacher, we're always, one of the skills I learned is we're always looking at our lesson planning, always looking at our tests. We're always looking at how we can be better. Yeah. No matter if we're teaching the same subject to the same age student every year, we're still trying to get better. And we're still trying to reflect on what went well and what didn't go well. What can I improve for next time? And so I think as much as teaching was, for me, I don't give it enough credit with the skills that I've learned, because being a teacher has taught me so many things, and self-reflection is one of them. Because there's no way we can get better if we don't figure out in our own lives what's working, what can I continue, what's not working, how can I make one shift to make it better? Try that. And if that doesn't work, change one more thing, try it again. Also, it's the scientist in me. Yeah. I love data. And so I love figuring out, all right, there is a solution somewhere. How are we going to get to that solution? It might not be the first iteration. It might not be the second. That's okay. We're still getting closer to it.
That's right. No, it's great. And one of the things you mentioned, which really resonated with me, and as a teacher, you said that you loved being a student. And I think it's so important. And in leadership, one of the things that sticks with me is you're continuously learning. You don't stop learning, right? And that's so important. I think people think, you reach a point and then you should stop, but you never stop learning.
No, I used to tell my students, I'm a lifelong learner. Yeah. And it's funny because when you're young, when you're, teenager, even in college, you think you know everything.
That's right.
It's just part of you don't know what you don't know. So you don't know a lot. Yeah. And then as you get older, you're like, oh my God, what? And it's mind-blowing to how much you don't know. And then you just realize, wow, this is amazing. Like it makes life dynamic. It's never boring.
Yes.
And you can go into so many rabbit holes in so many directions. And time permitting, you can do it all.
Yep.
Depending on your passion, depending on what interests you. But you just gotta keep going. Start and keep going.
And you might find something new that you like, and you know, your path might change along the road. So awesome, Neha. So can you tell us about your being a macro coach? Give us a little bit of detail about that. And again, how, you told us briefly how you got into that. Talk to us about, you know, who are your typical clients and how do you help people?
Sure. So, as I mentioned earlier, I've dieted basically my whole life.
Hmm.
I have a close relative who even had an eating disorder, and so I've witnessed how food can be a source of control for some people. And while I never had an eating disorder, thankfully, I did witness, looking at magazines and movies and how everybody was skinny and thin and had a specific body type. And growing up as an immigrant in US, it was definitely the forefront in my mind growing up. So fast forward to pregnancy when my body really changed for the first time. I had two girls, so after my second pregnancy, I really just wanted to be back in my pregnancy body. And I really did not have a healthy relationship with food. And it made sense because I was working, I was teaching, I was in, the coding boot camp, I was breastfeeding, there was a lot going on. I had very little time. And I didn't know the science behind nutrition because I never learned it. I don't know about you, but they don't teach about nutrition that I can remember in elementary school, high school. I feel like nutrition is so important because we all eat every single day. We need to be able to fuel our bodies. But I never learned how to read a nutrition facts label or figure out if I was getting enough protein. I had never even heard of macros before. And so one thing led to another. And after I had been asked if I was pregnant for the 10th time when I was just postpartum, I was like, I need to do something. I need to take action, which is when I started listening to podcasts and I learned about what macros was. So macros is short for macronutrients, and there's 3 macronutrients in your food: protein, fat, and carbs. Mm-hmm. And it's much more than counting calories because each macronutrient has a very important role in your body. And because every person is different, there's no perfect diet for everyone. So figuring out what macro targets are good for you and your body and your health factors, that was really the key for me to losing the weight and figuring out that I could be strong. And it gave me so much confidence because I was able to accomplish a goal with the support and guidance of a coach. And while my relationship with food improved, I was able to get certified as a Scrum developer in my company. I felt that I had the confidence to get a new job, and I ended up getting a promotion. I was able to fit into so many clothes. I was teaching my girls what I was learning. I just felt like I found my voice in a way. And I just wanted to share it with everyone. And I didn't want anyone to suffer the way that I did growing up, thinking that you had to give up your favorite foods in order to feel healthy, be healthy, look good in your body, not be afraid of the camera. Wear clothes that actually show off your figure because you're proud of it.
That's right.
And it started off with food and wanting to lose weight. But as I mentioned before, that was the outcome. But I fell in love with the journey. Mm. And it was a transformation for me. And not just with food. It's been a transformation. All the principles that I've learned, it has helped me with my finances. Yeah. It's helped me being productive with my time. Just pure knowledge of what to eat and what not to eat. And it has just given me a sense of purpose in my life. And I'm so excited to be able to help. And so I usually help busy women, working women who are committed to their health, but they just don't know what to do because there's so much information out there that they don't know what is correct, what is not, what is good for them.
That's right.
And so when you see somebody on social media, magazine, movie, whatever it is, you're like, wow, what do they do? I want to look like that. And you copy what they do, of course it's not going to work because you're not the same person.
Yes.
What if they are vegetarian? What if they have an allergy, or they have PCOS, or they have high blood pressure, or you have prediabetes? There's so many factors.
Yes.
As simple as height and weight and body fat percentage. You just can't copy what somebody else is doing because health and nutrition is so personalized. And that's the number one thing I didn't understand growing up. That you have to do what's right for you. And it is a lot of trial and error. But once you figure out what works, you can just keep going. And that's the really honestly the help with the coach. And now that I have one coach, I feel like because I'm a lifelong learner, I realized how much I don't know, and the guidance of a coach who is an expert in an area can fast track you
Yes.
to all of the areas you want to be in. So I have a marketing coach, I have a mindset coach, I have a business coach, I have a macro coach, I have a trainer. And hiring help is not a sign of weakness. It is actually a sign of strength because you know that you don't know everything, but you want to learn as much as you can.
That's right. That's right. No, that's amazing. And, I tell everybody that the mind and body connection is so important. I talk about with my friends about, what you eat doesn't just impact your body, it also impacts your mind. That's something I don't think a lot of people understand that concept. And I think what you're doing is great. And having to go through that yourself and then being able to teach other people, I think it just validates everything a lot more than, hey, this is from a book and I read this and now I'm implementing it. And like you said, everybody's body and, biology and the way they work is different. So what works for someone else doesn't necessarily work for you. And God knows, like, I've trialed and tested so many things that didn't work for me either. You just have to find what's best for you. That's fantastic. So before the end of our podcast, we've come to a segment where I called rapid fire questions. I'll ask you a series of questions, and the first thing that comes to your mind, you can just shout it out, and we'll move forward. You ready to go?
Yes.
Awesome. So what is your advice to people who want to transition between jobs?
Do it. Just start. Start looking.
Awesome. What is the biggest lesson you learned in your life so far?
Oh my gosh, one lesson. I write my rules. I learned all the rules, and now I'm bending and breaking them and writing my own.
Nice. What is the best advice you've ever received?
I think I already said it. Either you get the result you want or the lesson you need. Reframing failure.
Amazing. Describe Neha in one word.
Amazing.
Awesome. A lot of people trip up on this. And lastly, where can people find you?
I am most active on Instagram. My handle is macro friendly Desi. DESI.
Okay, awesome. And we'll have that for the folks. Again, I wanted to take this moment to thank you very much for being with me today. I greatly appreciate you sharing your knowledge, your experience, and your inspiring stories with the folks out there. And for all those out there who have any questions, you can drop it in the comments below, and I'll make sure it gets to Nehal, or you can reach out to her directly. And if you want any more information, follow, subscribe to the link below, and we'll see you in the next podcast. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.